Okay, so I thought today to talk a little bit about giving feedback, because I heard that you were talking about that in one of the classes this week, and to really emphasize that feedback can be positive feedback, pointing out what somebody's doing well, and it can also be feedback about what somebody needs to improve on or something that they're doing that's disturbing. Now, the whole thing about feedback is, first, before you do anything, is to differentiate in your mind the difference between giving feedback and complaining. Yeah? That's the big thing you have to do first, because giving feedback is done with the mind that cares for the whole community, that cares for the individual, that cares, if you're, I'm also talking, in a family or work situation or whatever, that cares for the whole group, okay? Complaining is when we latch on to one action that one individual is doing, or sometimes it's one action that more than one individual is doing. And we're upset about it. It's driving us crazy. We're irritated. We want it to stop. We're fed up. We say, I'm confused. How come that person does this and other people don't? Or, So there, with complaining, there's a lot of emotion involved. And it's an emotion of, what this person is doing is wrong, and I want it to stop right away because it's driving me crazy. Okay? And so that's kind of the motivation, as well as the theme or the feeling, the mood of it. Yeah, feedback is you really care for somebody's mental, physical, spiritual development. And so out of that care, you want to give them some feedback, or out of care for the whole community, you want to give some feedback. Okay? So we often get those two things confused. Yeah, but if we stop, and really look inside, and especially check our mood, and especially check if we're focusing on one individual, or two individuals who are doing a certain thing, and really check if there's some judgment in there of, those people should not be doing that. Yeah. So this morning at our stand-up meeting, Venerable Sepal had a wonderful idea that I want to repeat here, and I think we should all do. So let me know if I don't say it, properly. But it is when we are unhappy about something, or we have a complaint, we want something changed, we have our own little complaint box in our room. We write out ourselves what our complaint is. We put it in our own complaint box. Okay? Then in our meditation, we work on it, for about a week. And then after a week, we come back and we pull out the thing and, see, is this still a complaint? Did I resolve it? Does it need to be dealt with? Is this, Okay. So I thought that was a beautiful idea, because so often when we're unhappy about a specific thing, we want to let somebody know about it right now, and we're upset and we're irritated and we're not really thinking very clearly. Yeah. And so this will give us the time, to write it out, put it aside, work on it ourselves, and see, okay, is there some jealousy involved? Or am I anxious because I like everything to be organized in a certain way, and that person's not organizing it in that same way, and that makes me anxious, or because if there's a lot of emotion in it, it's good to identify for ourselves, what is the button that's getting pushed, because we're holding on to some kind of concept, yeah? And at the end of it, once you get your own internal stuff figured out, you may still look and say, that behavior is not conducive for the good functioning of this community. And so I need to say something about it for the benefit of that individual and the benefit of that community. And then in that case, you may go to the harmonizers and speak about it. Okay? Or you may choose to speak to the individual about it. Okay? So you have to discern for yourself who to speak about it with. But it works really well to have that pausing time, to really reflect, why am I so reactive? Yeah? So especially if we're feeling like, I've got to do something about this right away, that's a good indicator of, let's slow down this process, okay? Yeah. Unless, of course, it's something really dangerous for somebody that you think is something really urgent that gets dealt with urgently, because something's doing something dangerous or, reckless or something like that. Okay. So, also another thing that often gets involved with that's going on is to check at when is our mind focused on others and when is our mind focused on ourselves. And I think this is what's going on during that week when you're trying to work with the issue, because if you're paying so much attention to what everybody else in the community is doing. Yeah. Oh, so-and-so leaves their shoes outside the meditation hall in a mess, and I trip over them. And so keeps food by their bowl overnight, even though we're not supposed to do that. And so-and-so, is supposed to go work in the garden, and they don't show up. And so is this and that. So if you're like that, your whole attention is focused on what other people are doing. Okay? Is that what the Buddha asked us to do in our practice to tame our mind? No. Yeah. What did the Buddha say? Origin of happiness and suffering is in here. So if we're finding at any particular time that our mind is just really coming up with lots of things that we are not happy with, then what I think is we're not really happy with ourselves to start with. Yeah, that's what I discovered many years ago, is my mind gets very critical of everybody else when I'm not happy with myself. So if we need to withdraw the attention from outside and okay, how can I get in touch with what's going on in my own mind? How can I pacify my own mind? How can I accept myself? Yeah. And work on taming our own mind instead of always blaming something outside and wanting to change it. So to really work with that. But like I said, that doesn't mean we get so withdrawn inside ourselves that we don't say anything to anybody. Or we think that in order to give feedback to someone, we need to be close to Buddhahood or some professional, and only after you've managed to develop all sorts of techniques and skills to perfection, that's the only time you ever give anybody feedback. That's wrong, because that is coming from our old favorite, attachment to reputation, liking for praise, disliking for blame. Okay? Those are 8 worldly concerns. That is not a Dharma motivation. That is not a valid reason for giving feedback when feedback is needed. Yeah, not when you're complaining, but when feedback is actually needed to correct a situation. Okay, so that's very, very important. Also, another point in this is that the successful giving of feedback does not mean that the other person is not triggered. This is very tied in with the attachment to reputation and praise and aversion to blame and so on. Because sometimes when you give feedback, we've just been talking about radical candor. That's what she's advocating, is you're saying something that's going to push enough of a button in somebody that they're going to wake up and listen to what needs to be dealt with. Yeah. They're not going to necessarily look at you and say, oh, you're so kind, you're so wise. They may look at you and say, what are you doing telling me what to do? Or, I don't do that. And they give their whole defense of why they're right and you're wrong. That kind of stuff is not an indication of successful giving of feedback. Yeah, because when you give feedback, you do it out of compassion. And remember, compassion doesn't mean that you're babying somebody and protecting them. But compassion means that you're making them grow. You're helping them to grow. Yeah, and so sometimes they may get triggered and they may get upset. But if they're smart, they'll go back and they'll think about it. Yeah. If they're smart, they might say, I will do as directed, and go back and think about the feedback they got. This is in terms of negative feedback. If they're not smart, they're going to defend themselves. They're going to blame you. They're going to go talk to somebody else in the community and complain about you. That's okay. That doesn't mean that what you did was wrong or bad. Yeah. I mean, many times I know for myself, I had to think, and this is the radical candor part, people say things to you that you don't like to hear, and you go, oh, I need to pay attention to this. Yeah. And I can say for sure that has saved my ordination. Yeah. So it's not just little things, it can be big things. Yeah. But it makes you wake up and pay attention. And that's what success is, even if the person can't stand you for a while. Okay? Because I've had the experience also of giving feedback to people, and then years later, they come and thank me, even though at the time they were furious. Yeah. And so similarly for me, been triggered by some things people said, and then years later, just like, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah. Okay. So much depends on our motivation, our state of mind. Techniques are nice, but they're not the whole thing. Yeah, they're not the whole thing. We can't just, look up in a management book about, how to give feedback. That's, because that doesn't deal with your motivation. And motivation's crucial. And then you learn the technique or the skill, sometimes how to give it. Okay? Yes, but when I saw all the hands go up, what I was hearing was, yes, but...
We have an agreement not to mind read here. So from my teacher days, labels are so powerful. So the phrase negative feedback is already doomed.
Right.
So the phrase we had was constructive feedback.
Constructive feedback. Good.
And so then when you knew that you were going to get some constructive feedback, it would start by pointing out something, first of all, where you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the constructive feedback part is, this is another place where, you can look at how you can grow into this.
Right.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. And so that's why they often talk about giving feedback as a sandwich. You start out saying something that the person has improved in, that they're doing well. Then you give the meat or the cheese of the situation, that what they need to improve on. And then you end it by, again, some encouragement or something like that. Yeah. And it does help.
So, Venerable, at the beginning of your talk, you said if you noticed one specific behavior, that's not exactly feedback, that's probably criticism. But
say that again.
So you said, how to tell the difference between criticism and feedback?
Oh, yeah.
And so...
complaining and feedback.
Complaining. And so complaining would be like one specific behavior that you see and you don't like. But then when giving feedback, I've been told or I've heard that you're supposed to be specific about, certain instances.
Yes. But you see, complaining is, why are you doing that? We have a rule in the community not to do that. You're not keeping the rule. You're always kind of doing your own thing and ignoring everybody else. Okay, or actually complaining is not what they say to the person. They come and they say that to me. So-and-so is doing this and that, and they shouldn't. I thought we're not supposed to be doing this and that, and they're doing it, and then their friend starts doing it too, and, I just don't. It drives me crazy, and they shouldn't be doing that. That's complaining. Okay? Giving feedback is sometimes you give it to the person, but if you're going to give it to, like me or the harmonizers, you would say, I'm concerned for the community. I see this behavior happening, and you don't even need to mention the person's name. Sometimes that person may ask you for the name, but the name doesn't matter. It's, I see this happening, and it concerns me for the well-being of the community. And do you see the difference in the tone of voice? Do you see the difference in concern for the community compared to, they're doing this, or, and they shouldn't be, or, I have to do this and they don't have to do. How come? That's not fair. There's a difference, isn't there, in what you're saying and in how you're saying it, and in what's going on in your mind. Okay?
Still be specific about the behavior, but not like pointing a finger at somebody in particular.
I mean, the complaining is very often behavior specific. Yeah. Yeah. They don't stay until the end of the dishes. They do a little bit and then they leave. That's pretty specific. Okay? Yeah. But see, the thing, what's really going on is there's some unhappiness in our own mind. We're jealous, we're confused, we're upset, and we're saying this action by this person is what's causing what's happening in me, but we're not owning what's happening in me. We're saying this person, it's all coming from their side hitting me, and I have no responsibility for being upset or offended or whatever it is. Okay, you see the difference? Usually you will find that if somebody comes or what I do is if somebody comes to me to complain about what another person is doing, I usually, and I advise other people do this too, I turn it back to them and say, why does this upset you so much? Yeah, what's going on in you? What's the button that this is happening in you, that what this other person is doing is so unsatisfactory. And I turn it back to them. If someone comes to me with a genuine concern for the community, then I really listen and I act on it. And I'll tell you, I hear many more complaints than I do genuine concerns. Yeah? So, just, because if we take every complaint as a genuine concern, we're going to go crazy. We're going to be working with our duckies, lining them up again and again and again. And nobody's going to want, this person wants the duckies this way, and that person wants the ducky that way. And that's why I always end up saying, did you come here to tame your mind, or did you come here to get your way?